Hello everyone, welcome to the Corkdorks Podcast. Each episode will be exploring all things wine, spirits and beer. I'm your host, Paul Patel. We're going to kick off each episode with a small segment of what's new in wine, spirits and beer. Today we have Jakob from Corkdorks to talk about a wine that he's really excited about. Jakob, what have you found for us this week?
So this week, I've picked Forge Cellars out of Seneca Lake. Before I get started on the wine, I would like to take us all on a little detour back to the very distant past of 2010. So what some might not realize about the early 2000s leading up into 2010 is that America was going through a huge revolution of Americana music, and I had the absolute blessing and opportunity during 2010 to travel up to Seneca Lake. So, as I'm on my way up there, I loaded up my Volvo, which was a 1987 240, and I packed half my family into it, and we drove up to watch the Avett Brothers. And on the way up there, it was an absolutely beautiful day. I mean, it could not have been better for driving. It was absolutely serene. Paul, you mentioned that you were up there during a very similar time, and you remember
Buffalo,
it was
yes,
yeah, which it was absolutely stunning. Just it couldn't have been a better day. So during the course of the show, it was about a 3-hour show, and when we came out, it was absolute blizzard. I mean, just snow everywhere. It just in the few hours that we were there, it dropped about 1.5 to 2 feet of snow. I mean, it was insane. It was worse snowstorms.
I'm going to say that. I think I was in Buffalo then, because I think we were there and we were going to Toronto.
Yeah,
and we were actually, our flights almost got cancelled.
Yep.
And we were the last flight, and they took us into Buffalo because we had something in Toronto we had to be at. So we could only get to Buffalo, and we had to drive, and it was like 7 feet of snow in Buffalo.
it was like one of the worst snowstorms that ever was recorded. It was just absolutely brutal. The amount of snow that came down was...
I think this is the one.
Yeah.
Oh, what were we doing? Why were we going there? I can't remember.
Yeah. It was bad.
It was bad.
It was real bad. I mean, it was insane. It was one of those things where nobody was expecting it. The weather did not predict it. It was crazy. I mean, so as we loaded all back up into the Volvo, and we took off and we started driving back, I managed to get us pretty far, and it only took us about 3 hours to drive up to Seneca Lake. But on the way back, it took us about an 8-hour drive just because we had to go so slow in order to make it back to even close to recognizable territory. And along our way back, I managed to also get us stuck into a giant snowdrift in a small, tiny town outside of a thrift store. But I digress from there. But basically, the reason why I wanted to start with that story is to just express of how unpredictable the weather is in that part of the world. And in order to grow wine, anyone knows that unpredictability can sometimes become the enemy. It is the thing you fear. It's what you do not want. So when you are able to create a good wine, it is something that amazes me. And Forge Cellars, they are able to produce something that is next level. It is tasty. It is delicious. And in particular, their dry Riesling that I have here in front of me is something that is exceptional. They are able to create a time after time delicious wine that by no means costs a tremendous amount of money. It is very affordable and very delicious. So it is just one of those things that I think that should not be overlooked, because in the world of Rieslings, it is often dominated by some of the bigger players in the field in different locations, such as grabbing something out of Germany or France or even Austria and the newcomers in the Riesling market. They come out with some things that are no doubt impressive and amazing, but there are other sections of the world that make equally delicious Rieslings, and in my opinion, the Finger Lakes are one of those.
Up-and-coming regions, you would think.
Just amazing regions. The things that they do, I mean, they're stunning. It's like I was saying, the unpredictability of the weather just shows the talent and patience that these winemakers have harnessed and have been able to pass down. And it's something that it takes really family tradition to learn how to do these things. And their ability to come up with that is amazing that they're able to do it in such a kind of diverse and weird spot in the world. Granted, it is beautiful. If anyone has not been to the Finger Lakes, it is stunning. So
tell us, what can you pair with some of these Rieslings?
So this one in particular is a dry Riesling. So a lot of people get kind of steered off because they're not used to that. They typically, when they think of Rieslings, they think of something that is going to be sweet and that it is going to be sticky. But what people don't really realize is that Riesling is highly, highly acidic, and there are some that can handle that sweetness, and then there's some that just do not have a tremendous amount of residual sugar left in them, and this is one of those wines. So that high acid gets it to where it can cut through a lot of different meals, especially, we're sitting here, not sure when you will be listening to this, but we are in the approaching of the holiday seasons, and it is one of those things where turkey is the bird of choice, and Riesling is so good with turkey. It is amazing. With particularly dry bird, it is just kind of helps cut through that and gets the mouth watering, salivating, and all that good stuff. So there's a lot of different meals that you can pair with it, but typically if you are wanting to do particularly hot, spicy meals, Rieslings are great with, especially if you get one with a little bit of sugar left in it. But still, I've had plenty of delicious, hot, spicy meals that make your mouth want to scream and cry, and the Riesling comes in and comforts you like a nurturing mother. So it is amazing.
Yes. I love Rieslings, of course. As you know, Jacob, I love Rieslings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Paul and I have had many times we have popped some very delicious Rieslings together. And some of those nights we can get a little sloppy in them, but that's all par on course when you have a good wine. That's the nature of it.
Exactly.
But yeah, so that's basically the wine that I wanted to kind of showcase and talk about and point out. So
great, thank you so much, Jacob. A $20 Riesling. Go search it out at your favorite retailer. It's amazing. I'm sure, Jacob. I'm going to go try it out tonight.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
The Corkdorks Podcast is brought to you by Corkdorks Wine, Spirits, Beer, Nashville's top destination for everyday and collectible wines, spirits, and beer. Visit our Midtown location at 1610 Church Street or our Green Hills location at 4009 Hillsborough Pike. Now, back to the show.
So we are excited to have Anne Dashe from Dashe Cellars as our first guest on the show. So Anne, my question to you is, what got you started in wine? Why did you go to the University of Bordeaux?
Well, it was kind of, I was studying science, actually. I was in, biochemistry, and I was always interested, I was considering doing a career in the perfume industry at the beginning. And I was really looking for what I was going to do with my life, frankly. And I know I was always loved science and nature. And but I knew I was not meant for the rigorous path of science, of being in the lab all the time. And I was so on the campus, doing all my biochemistry classes, and I discovered that you actually could go to school to learn how to make wine, which was really? Obviously, being French, I grew up around wine. It was not something, I didn't discover wine. I just discovered you could go to school to learn how to make wine. And it was fascinating to me, because you have a little bit of science, a little bit of art. You touch on a lot of field. I love working manually, so I always love the cellar work. And it's just that all the pieces that come together to make a wine that fascinated me, beyond just making the wine, the love of wine, so.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I was like, this is for me. This is absolutely the kind of work I want to do, And so I apply, and at the time, actually, there was not that many ladies in the program, and I think it was the first time that they put so many people in the program, and after, so it's a 2-year program. And when I graduated, I'm not from Bordeaux, like I said earlier, I'm from Brittany, and I'm not from a wine family. And although I love my time there, and I still have amazing friends there, and love to go back, I realized there must be some a bigger world out there in the wine, And then, so that's kind of set me to look beyond Bordeaux, and that combined with my the fact that I was young and attached and the desire of traveling kind of like led me to California.
So why California? Why
the US? It was
and this is back
in 1991. Well, it was California was talked about in Bordeaux. Fun fact is you probably would hear more about California than Burgundy in Bordeaux at the time.
Oh wow!
Because they're so. Beside Bordeaux, they're convinced that there's nothing else around. So that's kind of the mentality. And everybody knew about the whole, you go North Hemisphere, you go to California, and you go down in New Zealand or Australia, you know what I mean? So I was like, let's do like a little around the world thing. Again, it was combining my love of wine and winemaking with the love of traveling. And so we were bunch of kids who graduated and said, let's hit the road and go travel and make wine. And then so we went about. So one of my professor who taught us how to taste wine actually is Jean-Claude Berrouet. He was professor at the university, but he was a consultant because his day job was the winemaker at Chateau Petrus. So we went to see him in his office in Libourne, next to Saint-Emilion. And we're like, Mr. Berrouet, we want to go to California. So at the time, Petrus had, Jean-Pierre Moix had his property with Dominus in Napa Valley.
Yes.
And so, Jean-Claude Berrouet was coming regularly to California and, knew all those people at Chapelet, at Chalk Hill, and he kind of like helped us. Call basically his buddies in Napa, say, hey, I got some young winemakers here who want to do an internship, and we came.
So how many of you?
We were like a dozen. It was like great. And then some of them came back, and then a friend of mine and I, we stayed because we were done. And then it was wherever the future would take us, That's great. Yeah, fun fact. That is amazing. It's nice to be young and
do whatever you want.
And free. I know.
That doesn't happen anymore. It's very settled. So continue your journey. Where did you go intern?
So I worked at Chapelet for. They hired me for 3 months at the beginning, and. So Philip Titus was the winemaker. He just started, and then actually another fun fact, he just called Kathy Corison, who had just left, Chapelet to start, our own wines, and she was working with Tony Soder and all that stuff on some other project. And then, so he said, hey, do you want a roommate? So I was her roommate for 6 months.
Nice.
Isn't it funny?
That is. Do you still keep in touch with her?
Well, Michael actually runs into her every year because we have the same distributor in New York. And but I saw her for the first time in a long time. Last year, we kind of like hugged each other. She's like, you haven't changed. I'm like, you too. So we keep in touch via my husband because for the last 20 years, basically, we've been busy running the business, raising kids, and all the non-fun stuff that comes with it.
That's right.
And we are to a certain degree in touch. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It's fun.
So how did you meet your husband?
Through friends in the wine industry. It really is a small knit, society. Everybody knows everybody. So I have that guy who I went to work with, Philippe, who fell in love with the lab manager at Ridge, and they have their own He's a consultant, a big consultant actually in Napa, and they have their own winery called Melka Wines. And they introduced, they naturally brought us together. We were just kids going out and having fun.
That's amazing.
So this is how probably most people meet, through friends.
Yeah. So then you got...
So, yeah, we got...
Let's travel forward to where you established Dashe.
Sure. So we were... we quickly, basically when I met him, it was a meeting of the mind, and then we got, we decided we were a little older. So we decided let's just get married and make Zinfandel together. And when Michael always been.
Oh, let's go back to why Zin became such a prominent part of your winemaking.
Well, so him working at Ridge with having all those connections, me coming from the Bordeaux background, discovering what Zin can do. We felt like Zin can be challenging, in the field and as a winemaker, and we really wanted, to show that, Zin is the kind of quintessential California varietal, and we really wanted to showcase that Zin, made in the right way, can belong with fine dining and can be a very layered, interesting wine.
And Michael learned that at Ridge. He was the assistant winemaker there for how long?
He was there for 9 years.
9 years. So he's been through the iconic Zin producer of California.
Absolutely. Paul Draper was definitely instrumental in showing single vineyard Zinfandel and what the varietal can do. Another thing is also maybe because of my I don't know for sure, but I feel like being French, if you make Cabernet or Pinot, you always look for that benchmark of Burgundy or France, and it was kind of challenging to kind of almost navigate in uncharted territory and then really try to see what you can do with the varietal and bring all your experience and your taste, your idea of wine and what we, Mike had learned at Ridge, and really try to make some interesting local, quote unquote, varietal. Yeah.
So you and Michael decided Zin was the way to go for you. How did you go about finding where to source, starting a winery, just starting the whole business itself? What made you go, hey, let's go open up a winery?
Well, at the very beginning, so we used our contact, mostly his contact, through, working with Ridge all these years in Dry Creek and everything. And at the beginning, to be honest, it was challenging just because all the good grapes are locked into contracts. So it became easier and easier after year, and now, people are calling us, you know what I mean? And then at the beginning, we didn't have, we started with, very little. And we actually decided to, because
very little being very little money to start a winery, right?
Full disclosure,
exactly.
We didn't make a fortune somewhere else before we started the winery. So we decided to custom crush, and that means, we made the wine in Mike's friend, actually Matt Klein, who we went to school with. And after, those first two vintage, the wines were great and everything, but we realized that we really wanted to control winemaking from A to Z and being able to make those calls that you cannot make if you make it in someone else's kitchen.
Exactly, yes.
And then it was very important, especially we don't own all the vineyards that we work with. It's those are beautiful partnership with old-time growers. People are not in making wine that solely grow grapes, and yes, we have contracts because everybody comes in, into the relationship. It shows how serious you are into the relationship, but really it's partnership, an understanding of what it takes to make great wines. We obviously decide when to pick. We discuss dropping crops if needed, so there's always that close monitoring and touching base on the vineyards.
And you have total control.
Yes, yeah.
From grape.
Yeah, but I don't like to
crush.
use the word control because that would mean you dictate what's going on, where I really come from a place of partnership more. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I prefer that notion. And then, so then we obviously decide when to pick, because that's kind of a really important decision for the story of the wine. And then we really wanted to have a say in how the wine is made. And, if you use someone else's facility, people work great, and I'm splitting hair here, but it's all really bringing all those layers and all that fine touch that, when you control everything,
Exactly. So, stylistically, your style of wines, how does it differ from the way it was made at Ridge?
Well, Mike would be probably the better person to answer that question.
Let's go back to how did you decide your style of wine? Why did you want to make?
Well, the style of wine is dictated. We're trying to go showcase basically the provenance. If you make Zinfandel and you have Zinfandel on the label, the wine should clearly identify as a Zinfandel. You know what I mean? It shouldn't taste like something else than Zinfandel. And then if you have an AVA, it should really showcase the AVA. So it's all about...
So what the AVA brings to the...
Yeah, so we started in Dry Creek. So a classic Zin from Dry Creek, you have that bright fruit, that lively acidity, I call it, because it's closer to the ocean. So you have great acidity in the wine that really makes the wine very fresh. And so... it's really, you want to show the provenance of the AVA, the varietal. And then I would say we definitely bring a little more old world flair to our wines. Yes, we make wine in California and we fully embrace that. But I think it would be fair to say because of our French-American connection, our palate is calibrated a little more towards the old world. So we always bring that old world flair, I call it, in our Zinfandel, which means that in all the Zins we make, you're going to have that, those hallmark, the characteristic of Zinfandel, but you're going to have that great acidity, the minerality, the texture that are more... what you find a little more in old world style, or now in the new world, you would find them in more cooler climate, high elevation vineyards,
So you also believe in minimal intervention?
Yes. I know people love to talk a lot about that today, but I want everybody to know this is not a novelty. Actually, that's how wine started. They did on Avis 3,000 years ago, So, we use the natural yeast that come on the vineyard, and we don't add anything in the wine.
Natural, there's no yeast added.
No, it's the yeast that grows, that's on the skin, on the grapes. And then I want to make clear that there's nothing wrong with overly crafting wine and using commercial yeast, and it's just a different philosophy about winemaking.
Different style making.
Different style, yeah, exactly. So our style is we really want to get close to what we call the terroir, the vineyard, and we feel like by adding yeast, adding other, product or technique that are close, it makes the wine a little more uniform. A little more polished maybe, but less authentic. And that doesn't mean the other wine is bad. You have amazing wine. It's just more crafted, and we're trying to not put all our fingerprints all over the wine.
Exactly.
If it makes sense.
Yes.
The only work we do a lot is when we ferment every lots of wine. We're really trying to really bring the best of every small lot, and we do blending. So all the layers of the wine come from where the grapes come from, and then we add. We like to blend a little bit of Petit Syrah sometime to bring some texture. So we have our signatures is sometime into the final blend. Blending. Yeah, we use little Petit Syrah like a spice rack, if you want, with the Zinfandel.
And I think Michael probably learned that at Ridge because they do that a lot.
Yes, and I learned that making wine in Bordeaux that, you can be true to varietal while using the synergy with other varietal to bring the best of that varietal. I always make the comparison when I make winemaker dinner so people can understand better, maybe, I don't know. But, you could, if you go into the cooking world, you could cook the best chicken in the world. You still put salt and pepper on it. That'll bring the best of the chicken. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's kind of that same, and everybody knows it's chicken, even if you put salt and pepper on it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a bit of a rough comparison, but kind of gives you the idea of how those varietal works with the main one.
Yeah.
That's kind of that approach. It makes sense?
Oh, it does make sense. Okay. It absolutely does. So as far as sulfites, you don't add much sulfites as well. And what's your take on why?
So again, this is like a personal preference. We do, so there's sulfites, natural sulfite coming from, the grapes, and we add a little bit at the crusher just because we do native yeast. It helps the yeast that is going to start the fermentation to take over, because there's a lot of microorganism at the beginning and needs to sort themselves to have the right yeast starting the fermentation. And then we just don't like to we use the minimum because we don't need to add a lot, and it's, too much sulfur. First of all, I'm very sensitive to sulfur, actually can detect. And then it's just kind of mute. It kind of too much sulfur has tendency to mute a bit the flavor profile and the wine, and there's no reason to overdo it there.
Because I guess wine is a natural living thing.
Yeah, and which means that you have to be, people I think if you go towards industrial winemaking, sulfur is used to preserve, wine against, things that could happen to, like microbiological, deviation. But, when you run a big kitchen, you have to use all those rules because you can't keep an eye on everything. But we're small, we're super clean, we have steam cleaning all around the winery, so you have to be very clean when you use low-level sulfur, not to have those microbiological deviation, that could denature the wine. So it's a philosophical, approach, and you can do it when you're small, and because you can pay a lot of attention to what you're doing, so you can take, quote unquote, that risk. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So let's talk about some of the wines we're tasting today.
All right.
The Les Enfants.
So Les Enfants Terribles, that's a series we started in 2007, and most of the wine in that series, the reds are made in the Beaujolais style. The wine we're showing tonight is technically not the Beaujolais style, but it's a very interesting wine because it's the Carignan from the Evangelo vineyard in Contra Costa, and the vines are about 120 years old. So Frank Evangelo used to own the vineyard, and now it's owned by Morgan Peterson from the Bedrock Wine Company. He's been, doing actually a lot of great work. Really working with all the heritage wine and historical vineyard in California. So he's done a lot of great work with that. And so the vines here are basically planted on the sand dune. It's in town of Antioch, Contra Costa, so it's right off the delta from, which is off the San Francisco Bay. The roots are about 40 feet deep. going looking for the water of the delta. And
so they're very much stressed.
Oh yeah, they're beautiful. They're head trained. There's no phylloxera going through, in sandy soil, so they were never grafted. So it's on their own root. And I love Carignan. I mean, it's usually a varietal blended with Grenache and Mourvedre. So there's not that many 100% Carignan out there. Brings a lot of blue fruit. Is a very unique wine, fruit profile wise. So I encourage everybody to taste some with any more spicy sausage and stuff like that. Gumbo, and the next one you want me
yes, let's talk about. Yeah. Anne, I was looking. How many different types of Zins do you produce? And you also do a Cabernet.
Yeah.
So how many Zins and how many single vineyards do you produce?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 single vineyards, and sometimes a little more. We do small lots for our wine club. So, we have a Zinfandel that is a blend, from Contra Costa, and then the next one, it's from Dry Creek Valley, a reserve. That's where we started the company, and we love that area because I think it makes some amazing Zin.
I think my favorite Zins are from Dry Creek.
Yeah, it's wonderful because it's closer to the ocean, and you have those, cool morning and night but warm days, so you have that great acidity in the wine. And so the Dry Creek, we always like to blend a little bit of Petit Syrah, but there's no set recipe. It could be 3 to 10%, just to lend some texture and structure to the mid palate. Back to what I was saying earlier about having, a lot of layers and interesting things going on in the wine. The wine that we're showing tonight also is the one of the single vineyard is Todd Brothers Ranch. So it's from Alexander Valley. It's only 10 minutes east of Dry Creek, but it's a lot warmer. So the fruit is a little darker, and it's a hillside vineyard, volcanic soil. And so you're going to have that earthy characteristic. So the Zin is definitely a little darker, a little broader mouthfeel. It's wonderful Zin to have with braised meat and grilled steak. And then the Cabernet you wanted me to talk about. Is
that the only cab you produce?
Yes.
Yes.
Cabernet, we don't make a lot. It's kind of a little nod to our years in Bordeaux. And then this is less than 300 cases made, and it's actually an organic vineyard in Mendocino County, a new appellation called Eagle Peak. It's the Hard Arrow Ranch. And, Mendocino is a little cooler, and it's, elevation again there. So it's the texture is a little more linear and is, again, a little closer in style to what you would have in Bordeaux than Napa Valley, where the fruit is a little riper and you have a little broader texture to the wine. So, that's kind of a very quick run on some of the wines. I think if there's one thing I would, want people to, remember is, obviously Dashe Cellars, we're mostly known for Zins, but our Zins are a little more, we really look for balance and elegance and texture in wine. And I think that if you get a chance to taste them, you'll find that. I have to say I have a 100% conversion rate on bringing people back to Zinfandel.
With these wines, they're amazing, and I encourage everybody to go, search these out at your fine wine shops. You're not going to find them in grocery. Beautiful wines. I think this wraps up our session today. Anne, thank you so much for coming and spending a half an hour with us.
It was my pleasure.
Amazing.
Thanks for having me.
I could keep going on and on and on.
Yeah, we could keep going on.
It was wonderful. But we have to stop, I think. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us for the first episode. We have some other incredible guests coming soon. For updates and more great content, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Corkdorks PC. Until next time, this has been Paul Patel, and this is your Corkdorks Podcast.